Hello, Prime Media audiences. This is your host, Ladette Muleta. I am here with a special guest today. I'm here with Honorable Obolencho Leta. I'm very honored that Obolencho Leta is here at Prime Media. I'm very delighted to have him. Obolencho, thank you so much for joining me here today. I really appreciate you taking your time from your busy schedule and giving us your time. Thank you. I'm going to go straight to our discussion points and start off with touching up upon the meeting that the Prime Minister just recently had where he was able to answer questions. The recent meeting that the Prime Minister just had, I would like to get a good general conclusion to what you thought the meeting was, how it was, were some of the questions addressed very important, and what your views are in general.
He came to the meeting well prepared. He was armed with statistical data that he was just offhand proclaiming. That's one important observation I made. Quite often, officials in this country do not go to meetings well prepared. The Prime Minister came to the question and answer session well prepared. He had statistical data at his fingertips, which is very rare in Ethiopia's discourse. Quite often, officials go to meetings or to question and answer periods not prepared. They get lost. He was, to the contrary, well prepared. That is one observation. The second observation I came away from that session was the clarity he had about the peace talks. A lot of rumors are about whether the peace talks are going on or not, and he made it very clear that nothing will happen behind the backs of the public, that there is a committee actually working on formulating the position of the government, and that committee is being led by the Deputy Prime Minister himself, and it is the result of its work is expected within 2 weeks, we were informed. And this clarified a lot of things. The final issue, which was important to me, was the rumors circulating around the currently ongoing law enforcement operation. Law enforcement operation, particularly in the Amhara region, was portrayed as if it is targeting Amharas, and particularly the Fano. He made it very clear that Fano per se is not the target of the law enforcement operation, but individuals who are abusing the name of the Fano. That roughly over 3,000 of them have been arrested. Most of these happen to be defectors from the armed forces. And finally, the other issue that was raised was law enforcement here in the capital, where lawlessness has grown, a lot of banditry taking place, robbery, armed, organized robbery, and in order to curtail this, an operation is underway. In general, the issues that stuck in my mind
Great, excellent. I think it's very important that having that answered, having the Prime Minister address the public, it just seems like it clarifies a lot of the questions and the rumors. So I think those are really great points that you raised that was clarified. I want to go to my second discussion point, and that's the unity of Oromo politics. Why it's very important for Ethiopia. Where do you see the current situation in regards to people uniting for the future? What are your thoughts? And since you are you have played one of the major key roles in Oromo politics.
Well, the fact that we are addressing Oromo politics as separate from other political alignments itself is new. This is the result of the last 50 years of Oromo movement. The Oromo actually crystallized as a nation as recently as post-2015 uprising. Before that, it was just dispersed and taking the agenda of this or that force, where Oromo line, Oromo question became crystal clear was post-2015 protest movement. That is when Oromo became qualified as a nation, in my opinion. Until then, it was just a pre-national existence. Now, the movement 2015 to 2018, its strong point was the fact that it did not have a central leadership. It was very dispersed. Its biggest weakness also was the fact that it did not have central leadership. And that is why I thought we stand a better chance to transition to democracy this time, because there isn't a single dominant leadership. Unfortunately, after that, when political parties started returning from exile, the stand of the Oromo was divided into two, roughly, presumptuously, not explicit, but implicitly there appear to be two stands. One is still pursuing an independent Oromia. The other is the democratization of the multinational federation. Now, since these stands are not explicit, there is a lot of confusion. Even leaders do not take a clear stand on this issue. For example, the leaders of the Oromo Liberation Front rarely come out clearly saying they are still pursuing an independent republic. But if you read their body language and all of this, it looks like they have not given up, at least they have not given up on the pursuit of independence. The rest of the society, the rest of the political elite would be satisfied with democratizing the multinational federation. I belong to this camp, and I'm explicit about it, although I don't lead any group anymore. Mm-hmm. But that's my stand, and I believe how the Oromo question will be resolved is important not only for Ethiopia but for the entire Horn of Africa, because the Oromo question is not an internal, specifically internal, purely internal Ethiopian affair. it has repercussions that straight to the Horn of Africa. And Ethiopia, where the Oromo plays its appropriate role in Ethiopia's politics, would be a very strong, democratic, and stable Ethiopia. And there are forces in the Horn of Africa who fear this, and also who await it with hopefulness. So we will see.
Great. So it's very vital that the questions that the Oromo have made clear on the things that they have demanded, which is fair equity and democratization in general, is answered. I think that's important, for any group in order to have democratization, is that every group has to be represented and heard, and at the same time given the opportunity. So this is rightfully questions that need to be answered if they have not already been answered. What is the status of Afaan Oromo language in the federal government? It's something that it seems like obviously things have changed, like you said, since 2018. There's a lot of changes, but in actually making Afaan Oromo a federal language, the actual ruling has not taken place. Where do you think it's standing? What's the holdup?
I have no idea. I am as puzzled as anybody regarding this matter. But there has to be a bill has to be submitted to Parliament to this effect, and elevating the Oromo language to federal status. I think more important is what the Oromos themselves are doing with their language. Any language that has not become an instrument for trade will die, no question about it. This is very key. And this cannot be done by proclamation. This has to be ingrained in the minds of Oromos. And I think the decisive factor would be what Oromos decide to do with their language more than anything else.
So the actual action that takes place within the society is more important than the law. On the other hand, do you believe that if it actually becomes a federal language, one of the things that I have noticed, the difference between pre-2018 and now is that you readily hear Afaan Oromo around in Addis. Before you can go months or so on. I'm talking about in the vicinity where you don't read Afaan Oromo in businesses and so forth. So now those things are changing. This is obviously the work of the citizens, but to actually have those services in the federal government, would it take it one more step? Yes, I agree with you that I think the citizens play a big role, but having it accessible at the federal level, would it help increase the success of having the language?
I actually believe this has a deeper implication. It has failed to crystallize until now because in this country citizenship rights have never been discussed. There is an assumption that urban people are the citizens. The rural ones barely. Citizenship rights have been expanding generation after generation. The first to appear was civil rights, the right to equality before the law and all of this. The second right that was instigated, was encouraged by the existence of civil rights was political rights. The second group of citizenship rights that crystallized were political rights. That is the right to stand for elections, the right to vote, the right to self-expression. And after World War II, the third group was added, that was social rights. The right to health care, equal opportunity, the right to employment, and so forth. After the end of the Cold War, a fourth group is emerging now, as we are experiencing currently. That is language and cultural rights. It is obvious that the above three, the previously mentioned three, would be deficient unless language rights and cultural rights are also upheld. In this country, the fact that the federation was based on linguistic groups has triggered a long-lasting controversy. I believe this would be put to rest if we focus on citizenship rights and the fact that it is a dynamically evolving concept, and we have to put to rest these controversies, because unless we agree on which kind of federation is appropriate for Ethiopia, we cannot stabilize the political system that we have right now. And that is my hope.
That's a great point. Well, great. I guess this will take me to our next point, which is, you mentioned it earlier on a bit about lawlessness. There's a lot of lawlessness happening in Ethiopia, unfortunately. If that's because, technically the country is still undergoing many changes. I remember I was young, but I remember the period that TPLF was taking power. There was a lot of lawlessness in Ethiopia. There was a lot of crimes, and eventually that was completely almost stopped. Where do you see the current situation with lawlessness, from petty crimes to, the Prime Minister also mentioned it, from petty crimes to, individuals organizing as gang members, giving difficulty to regular citizens, to government employees using their authority in causing inconvenience for citizens. What do you think about that, and what are some of the steps that can be taken to ensure that this is stopped?
Well, in a way, I'm not surprised, because this country's problems, instead of being resolved, got complicated over time. Let us take two issues that were raised by the student radicals of the 1960s. The land to the tiller, that it was resolved in such a way that land became the property of the state instead of being allocated to the tiller individually or collectively. The initial proclamation said that land ownership would be public. Later on, the military regime changed it to state ownership. And because of that, under the Derg, there was no opportunity to to engage in corrupt practices regarding land, because the state controlled everything and there was no business opportunity. Once the EPRDF came to power and opened up the system to right-wing political economic system, it became the cause for a lot of corruption. And that corruption is still continuing. One area where this government is completely stuck is on how to deal with corruption. The second area, the second issue that was raised by my generation of students was the national question. The right to self-determination of oppressed nations in this country. That was also implemented in a distorted manner because the TPLF from a minority nationality came to power in '91. And therefore, in the administration outside Tigray, they made sure that only yes men will lead the various regional states, particularly Oromo and Amhara. As a result, there is a certain vacuum of leadership was created. People with lacking determination, and there is a crisis of leadership. Add to this a third factor. Ethiopia's population more than doubled after the federation was announced. And all of these added together make for a very explosive economic situation. And I believe things would get worse before they start getting better. I think what is required in this country right now is a consensus on how to address these issues. These issues should be tabled at the upcoming national dialogue, and a consensus, a countrywide consensus reached on these issues. I believe it is essential that we address these issues not just as parties, not as individuals, but as a country in general.
Great. Great. Yes, absolutely. I think it's very important. Okay. I know we're running out of time. I just want to have one more discussion point, which is about the international community and how it's responding towards Ethiopia. It's, as we know, Ethiopia has been under a lot of pressure from the international community, whether it's regarding internal conflicts or leadership in general. How is that view changing? Is it changing? Is the international community warming up to the new administration in Ethiopia? Clearly the citizens of Ethiopia have also responded defending its country. Has that helped? Where do you see the future with international relations of Ethiopia?
International relations are in disarray right now. Every war that Europeans engaged with each other ultimately evolved into a global war. And the longest global war was the Cold War. When the Cold War ended, the West simply celebrated as their victory, as the victory of liberal democracy, and did not address the underlying causes for international relations. Right now it is perfectly clear that international order is in turmoil. The war in Ukraine has revealed it very clearly, and other wars elsewhere. This is where Ethiopia fits into the situation. The war going on in Ethiopia is very complicated. It is not just intra-state, it is also interstate because a neighboring country is involved. At the same time, it is intra-community. The Tigrinya-speaking Orthodox Christians of the north are fighting it out. So in this aspect, if you look at it, it is intra-communal. But in order to resolve these issues, you have to categorize the nature of the conflict in one fashion or another. And here is where it is complicated. And the international community, of course, does not care to understand. They don't bother to invest time and energy trying to figure out what Africans want. They just flex their muscles. And this is what's happening. We have a long way to go in having a correct international relations again, particularly with Western governments.
What do you think we can do in order to ensure a win-win relationship?
I think we should not take stand at this stage. There is a re-emergence of the Cold War. It appears that we are at the beginning of another Cold War, with Russia and China on one side, and the rest of the Europeans on the other side. I think we should stay out of this polarization.
That's the key thing that's happening in the international relations currently.
It looks like, particularly the Horn has become an arena for rivalry between these forces that appear to confront each other at the global stage. And Ethiopia, of course, being the biggest country in the Horn, is drawing a lot of attention. And Ethiopia should manage its relations with these two poles very carefully.
I agree. Okay, Bolenjo, I really appreciate your time. I know I could have many questions for you, but I'm very, I recognize the importance of your time. So I really appreciate you. Thank you for stopping by here at Prime Media. Honored to have you as my guest, and I hope I can invite you again with other pertinent topics. I appreciate you very much.
Thank you very much. Anytime.
Thank you. Thank you. Prime Media audiences, this is my half an hour with Obolenjo Letta. I am really honored to have him here. We'll be back with another guest. Thank you.